Hey, what's up, everybody? Good morning. I hope you're doing well. I've had a lot of coffee this morning, so this is going to be awesome. I was here last year, and it was such a great time, and I can't wait to be here again today. If this is your first time at App.js, get ready for an awesome 2 days. I can't wait to hang out with all of you today and tomorrow. So today, I want to talk about EAS and iterating with confidence. James and Charlie just talked about how Blue Sky and the Brex team does the clicker work? I can't change slides. Fantastic. One moment, please. OK, there we go. James and Charlie just talked about how the Brex team and Blue Sky use our tools to develop, review, and deploy their code. And these are generally the three things that we do as developers to get features out to users. So that's what I want to talk about today, how you can use our tools to do these things faster with your team. Because if we can move faster, we can ship better features to our customers sooner. My name is Jon Samp. I'm the head of product at Expo. So let's get going. I want to first talk about EAS. These are cloud services to help turn your project into apps by building them in our cloud, submitting them to the Google Play Stores and the Apple App Store, and then updating them after they're already in your users' hands. Before I was working at Expo, I was writing React Native apps, and I was doing it without Expo. And so I'd finally get a feature done, and once it was done, I'd have to build it manually in Android Studio and Xcode. And once that was complete, I'd want my coworkers to review my features, and so they'd have to do the same thing. They'd have to pull it with Git, they'd have to build it locally, and then sideload it on their own device. And then after that, I'd have to manually drag and drop these things into the Transporter app and then also into the Google Play Store website to get it deployed to the app stores. Usually that would take about my whole morning to get all of that coordinated. And then over lunch, I'd be looking over the app and I'd see like, oh no, there's a bug. And it's pretty easy to fix. But now I'd look across my entire afternoon's calendar and realize I have to do all of this again. So then I started discovering EAS and Expo, and it just made all of this stuff so much faster. I could run EAS build and EAS update and EAS submit, and it really just made that a non-issue. So that's something I'm really excited to talk about today. Some of the stuff that we do currently, and also stuff that is new over the last few months that I want to let you know about. So I want to talk about getting your team up and running super fast with EAS. Currently, we offer something called development builds. These are versions of your app that have developer tools built in. Just like how websites, you can right-click and get developer tools, this makes your app just like that. We also manage all of your team's credentials, and part of those credentials is a provisioning profile that we can use with internal distribution to sideload apps on your phone, so you can get a development build on your phone. This looks kind of like this, where you and your team can use your device's credentials to get a development build on all of your devices. This is super handy. But the thing that doesn't really work with this flow is that every single device needs to have their credentials built into the development build. And so we kind of run into this issue where if someone gets a new device on your team, or someone just joins your team, we then have to make an entire new build of your app. And this is a problem. How can I get another device on the latest development build of my app? To do this manually, you'd have to run EAS device create, which sets up all of your credentials. Or you'd have to manage all of your credentials yourself. Then you have to go and find the correct commit, you have to kick off a new build, and then you have to wait for that whole build to finish. So one way we're solving this year is re-signing builds with new device credentials, and we call that build re-signing. The way this works is you can run EAS build :resign with a profile name. And then we'll ask you which build you'd like to re-sign with whichever credentials that are new, and you can pick which one. So I took one of my personal builds, and I made a new build with it, and it took about 12 minutes. This is compared to just re-signing an existing build I already have, which took only 1 minute and 30 seconds. The cool thing here is that builds can take a wide array of times. They can take 5 minutes for a really simple app, or even 30 or 40 minutes for a really complex, huge app. If you re-sign a build, it always takes about 1 minute and 30 seconds, or somewhere around there. So this can really speed your team getting new people up and going with your app. Also, speaking of your team getting up and going, for larger companies, they often use something called single sign-on. Single sign-on is a way for your company to control what access you have to all kinds of web apps and other services. And Expo is going to be supporting that coming this summer. So if that's something your company uses, you can start using us as well. All right, next up, I want to talk about testing your features, because this is one of the things that causes me the most issues. We currently offer a lot of different features around testing your features. So we have organizations, which you can control your teammates' permissions and what people can do. We also allow you to create emulator and simulator builds of your app. Finally, we allow you to auto-submit your builds to the test track and to test flight. Now, one thing I do a lot is I create emulator and simulator builds. This will result in me having an APK file for Android and a tarball with an iOS app file for iOS. And a problem that I run into a lot is how can I efficiently get one of these emulator or simulator builds on my device quickly? Now, I usually do this manually. So that means going to the website, finding the build, clicking download, opening the simulator app, unzipping that tarball, and then dragging and dropping it into the simulator. I do this all the time. It's like clockwork, but it takes a little while. The way we want to solve this is by doing one simple thing, which is pressing the Y key. So we call this running simulator builds immediately. And the way that this works is when you make a build, at the very end, we will ask you to install and run the build. And we'll do all of those steps for you and install it on the simulator. Now, if you're used to using React Native CLI and building with Android Studio and Xcode, this kind of happens automatically. But we wanted to take this further, and we can go further here since we've made this build in the cloud. We can actually allow your teammates to do the same thing with a command called EAS build run. So if I make a simulator build on my computer, my teammate can run this, they can find the exact same build, and then it will download it and put it on their phone for them. So this is just a way that I can speed myself up, but then also speed up my teammates too. Now, running things on emulators and simulators is one way to test your code, but one thing I do a lot is I make PRs. Imagine that we've made a PR together that adds a banner to our app. It might be called PR302 adds banner, and it might look like something like this. If I want one of my teammates to view this feature and to also look at the code, I kind of run into this problem, which is how can I share a preview of my feature with my teammates? Generally, to do this manually, they'd have to clone the code, they'd have to install all the dependencies, they'd have to run a local server, and then they've got to open up Expo Go or a development build to load that. What we want to do instead is make this really fast. And we can actually use EAS update and branches. If you've heard of EAS update, generally it's thought of and used to ship production bug fixes to end users, but we can actually use the exact same mechanisms to preview PRs with our coworkers, which I think is like the superpower of the service. And we're calling this PR previews. The way this works is you can run EAS update -- branch, give it your branch name. We'll use Metro to bundle everything together and make an update of your current branch. Then, once you've done that, there are 3 different ways that you can preview this. You can go on our website at this URL down here, and you can scan a QR code to view any particular update. And actually, you can go to that URL. It will take you to the right place, even with the brackets and all. Another way is inside of Expo Go or development builds. You can see all the branches that you and your team have published, and then you can tap on them. And then over here on the right, if I tapped on that top one, I can see all of the updates that have been made. If I'm publishing on every single commit, this becomes actually kind of powerful, because over here, I would see all the updates. I could tap on the top one if I wanted, but I could also tap on all of the ones below it. So if there's a problem, this is actually a pretty interesting way to bisect a problem. Now, probably my favorite way to preview PRs is using Expo GitHub Action. This will add a comment to your PRs that, after publishing every single commit, will give you a QR code that your teammates can scan to preview your feature. So if I have a stack of 10 PRs ahead of me, it's just so convenient to be looking at the code, scan this QR code, and see everything working at the same time. It makes review go so much faster. Speaking of going faster, let's talk about builds. We all want to build faster because we're building all kinds of apps with our projects. We're building development builds with development tools inside of them, builds to review, and also builds for app stores. And now that you can build with any native code or library, we're making builds all the time. And earlier this year, we started moving our build infrastructure from Intel to Apple Silicon. And the results we've seen from this have been just kind of awesome. Here is an example of a build that we made. The first one, it took about 15 minutes and 41 seconds to run on Intel, and the exact same build on Apple Silicon took 9 minutes and 2 seconds. We were really thrilled with this, and so we started asking people on Twitter if they could send us their Intel to Apple Silicon times. And we found that on average, this resulted in 40% total less build time for developers. This is just awesome. It's so much better to build faster. But you might be saying, I wish we could build even faster than that. I mean, 9 minutes is still 9 minutes, right? So we're introducing worker sizes for builds. How this works is we have Android and Apple worker sizes. And by default, those new Apple Silicon workers are available to everybody. And those are the medium-sized workers. And we also have medium Android-sized workers. But we're introducing these large-sized workers. And those are even faster. I took one of my apps, and I built it on Intel, and then Apple Silicon Medium and Apple Silicon Large, and I compared all three. And here's what I found. The Intel one took nearly 14 minutes. I've got nearly 10 minutes for the medium one, which is now default. And on the large worker, it only took 5.5 minutes. This is awesome. In fact, so fast that when I ran this, I thought there was an error and that it had bugged out and ended early, but no, it was actually finished. So if you and your team need the fastest builds, you can start using this today. In your EAS config, you can add a resource class with a value of large, and that will instruct our builders to use the large worker class for you. So part of making your builds faster is about our machinery, and we can make it quite a bit faster on our side. But there's kind of another side to building, which is us, the developers. How can I make running builds faster like myself as the monkey behind the computer? Because I always have to run this command, EAS build, profile, whatever my profile is, and maybe some other flags too. And running this can be inconvenient or slow. And also, I'm spending most of my time in GitHub all day or on our website and not necessarily at my command line to remember what all of these commands and flags should be. So we're introducing GitHub linking. What this allows you to do is on our website, you can link your GitHub repository to a project. And this is what it looks like. Once you've done so, we can enable some pretty cool stuff. One of those things is kicking off a build from expo.dev. So since we have access to your GitHub, then we can allow you to fill out this form and then hit confirm, and it will kick off a build on our servers for you. This is fantastic for non-technical people on your team or just people not familiar with EAS CLI. But probably my most favorite way to kick off builds is right inside of PRs with labels. So when you set this up, you can add labels to your PR, like EAS build Android : production. What this means is EAS build, please make an Android build of my app, and then also use the production profile that's in my EAS config. This is awesome. And compared, if you put this and combine it with the preview QR code that I was talking about earlier, it's really cool. I can make a PR, I can add some screenshots of what's going on with my feature, I can add this to kick off a build, and then my reviewers can see an instant preview of what's going on. It happens all in GitHub. We think this is really neat. Now also, aside from kicking off builds this way, one thing that we do a lot with making a build is actually a lot of the stuff that becomes before the build happens. We often will unit tests, we'll run linting tasks, and we'll run end-to-end tests with something like Detox or Maestro. Generally, how we've done this in the past is run everything on the left with GitHub Actions, then run the build part with EAS. And so we have to kick off 2 CI processes. We've got to have 2 different configuration files, and YAML files are everywhere. So we're introducing custom build jobs. The way this works is in your EAS configuration file, you can add a config key with a route to a YAML file. And then if you go into the YAML file, you can write any process you'd like. So this allows you to install dependencies in this example and then to run tests, but you can do anything here. You could make a build, and then you can run your end-to-end tests, or you can notify Slack. Now, a cool thing that we're also exposing here is all of our build steps so that you can use the ones that you like of ours. So if you like that we manage your credentials, you can use that step from us. But say you want to replace Fastlane with Buck or Build Cache or something, you could write your own custom step for that one. So it makes the build process massively flexible and turns those 2 CI processes into just one. This is coming later this summer, so make sure to look out for that. All right, so moving on. I want to talk about making changes with confidence and kind of going back to that first topic I talked about shipping features. So when I was working on apps before, when I had a bug fix, for instance, this was kind of the process that I'd have to do. So over here on the left, I'd make a bug fix. I'd have to make a build of my project with the bug fix. I've got to submit it. Then I have to wait for store review. Then, once it's approved from the store, I have to wait for my users to download it in the background, which can take some time. I think, at least on iOS, there's like a 7-day window that people can get the new app. And then finally, my users will see the bug fix. So if there's something wrong, it can actually exist in production for quite some time. With EAS, we've made this a lot faster, and with EAS Update specifically. So now if I have a bug fix, I can run EAS Update, which publishes that bug fix. Then when my user opens the app, they will start downloading the new update, and then when they open it again, we'll apply the new update. The reason why we do that is so that they get the fastest startup time, and they can keep on using their app, and then it just updates seamlessly without them seeing anything. But we've heard a lot of feedback from all of you and from tons of developers that we need to make this more flexible. We want to get more adoption of end users on our latest code. And so we're making our Updates.js API easier to use. While it's supported a lot of these features, they've either been undocumented or just not very easy to use at all, so we wanted to make this better. One use case that we've found a lot is people want to make a UI that looks kind of like this, where a banner pops down that says there's an update available, and then the user can decide if it's a good time to reload for them or not. This changes this sequence of events to look like this. And the main differences here is that now it's a foreground step instead of an app open. A lot of people don't close their apps all of the time, or at least I don't. Maybe that makes me crazy that I don't like flick them all up and like close them all the time. So this means that when I foreground my apps, it would check for the update instead. Then it would download the update, and we could show a UI prompt. Instead of taking days for my users to get bug fixes, this might just take most of my users minutes to get bug fixes, which is really neat. Now, you can take this really far and be really heavy-handed with this. Like if you have an internal app that is absolutely essential that everybody is on your latest code all of the time, and you never want them to use anything but your latest code, you could show a UI like this, which covers their entire screen, and it just says, we are updating right now. This is going to take a moment, and we're going to force reload you once it's done. This turns the timeline to look something like this, where they foreground the app, it shuts down their app, downloads the update, and then force reloads. This can get your bug fix out in seconds if you want to sacrifice that user experience. Now, obviously, you'll have to do something that works for your app and write business logic that will work for your users, but I just want to show the spread of what this JS API can do. We've put a lot of these helpful APIs in this package called Expo Use Updates. It's still experimental, but we'd love for you to go and try it. You can go check that out today. Now, yes, there we go. Now, aside from getting your updates out as fast as possible, sometimes that's kind of a scary thing. Like, maybe you don't want your latest update out to all of your users all at once. And so I want to talk about that just a bit. So this is a pretty common pattern that developers do, and one I've done as well, where we have 2 different channels, a staging channel that goes to the test track and also to test flight, and then a production channel that goes to all of our production, like public App Store users. Generally, I'll create 4 builds at a time, and Android and iOS one for each. So I kind of think of these channels as like groups of users, where staging is like this small test group, and production is public and everybody. Then, a lot of developers will link these to different branches. So we've got version 1.0 that is stable and on production, and then we've got version 2.0 that is on staging that we're currently testing and trying to fix bugs on. Now, this is great, but implicitly, 100% of our users are going to both of these branches. So we're introducing EAS Update rollouts, and these are rollouts by percent. This allows us to change this graph to be something like this, where we point 10% of our users at version 2.0 to detect any bugs, instead of exposing our entire user base to the version 1.0. Now, here's how you can do this. You can run EAS channel : rollout, and give it your channel's name. Once you do, we'll ask you which branch you'd like to start rolling out and at what %, and then we'll show you the state of your rollout. You can rerun this command at any time to update this rollout. And if it's going well, you can roll it out to all users, and you can keep on moving on. So we're really excited to introduce that, something that people have been asking for. So hopefully that's good news for all of you as well. This can really de-risk publishing new code to your end users. And so that's a great win for teams who want to push things quickly. In addition, it's really nice to see what kind of code your users are running and who is running it and when. So we're working on a new feature that is going to look something like this, and we're calling it Insights. This allows you to see how many users have accessed your app and how many of them are in the latest Android and iOS build, and also what update they're running. We're going to be adding a lot more to this, but this is what we're starting with. The UI will look something similar to this, and we use data from Expo updates to fill this up. And we'll also have a new library called Expo Insights if you'd like to get even more data about how your users are using your app. If you want to know that your deploy actually went off and people are using your code, or why is there a bug still happening in production that I swear I fixed, this kind of data can really help you. We'll be releasing this also in the summer of 2023. OK, so I've talked about a ton of features today, and I've put them all on this one slide if you want to take pictures of this one. I just want to thank you all so much for learning about all these features and coming this morning. And yeah, that's all I have today. Thank you so much. I can't wait to hang out with all of you. See ya.